I wanted to convey this to our partners in the hope that they would hear and somehow adjust their attitude towards Russia, considering that, for instance, since the 1990s they promised us not to expand NATO to the east. They lied at every step, constantly deceiving and pretending that nothing of the kind happened. The same was true on many other issues. Therefore, it seemed to me that it was about time to tell our colleagues, we need to live peacefully. Let's somehow treat each other with respect, without imposing our will, without attempting to suppress others' will, considering the interests of all members of the international community. I don't know how effective it was, but since it's often remembered, it seems it was timely, that's what I want to say. But unfortunately, it was not heard. I've been in the presidential pool, a group of Russian journalists who cover activities of the Russian president and top officials, for 20 years. I have watched many of your trips. I remember the times when there were non-stop business trips to European countries and Russia's constant desire to interact and build relations with the West. At what point did we realize that these so-called partners of ours were not really our partners? It was clear from the early 2000s. Yet, we had illusions, I did too, which were about the following. Me and many others at that time believed that the problems in relations between the Soviet Union and the so-called West were primarily ideological differences. On one side, a communist regime, which was considered by many as tyranny, and on the other, the democratic world led by the United States. Strangely enough, I worked for almost 20 years in the Soviet Union's intelligence. I also thought that the main contradictions were of ideological nature. But the Soviet Union collapsed, there was no communist regime, yet the dismissive attitude towards the strategic interests of the Russian Federation remained, not just dismissive, but it was all tied to the clear desire to achieve geopolitical advantages. Moreover, even when I became president, I didn't understand everything right away. I began to urge my Western colleagues, look, you say one thing, but do another. Here is the proof. Then I presented this proof. They nodded and said, yes, we will sort it out now. And nothing happened. It was quite the opposite. It became obvious to me that ideology might have had some significance, but essentially, all these contradictions are based on geopolitical interests. That was the main thing. I mean, the Soviet Union performed an auto-da-fe. It dissolved itself. Partly, I think, I never discussed this with my predecessors. They believed that Russia would become part of the so-called civilized world. In the West, they decided the following, there is no Soviet Union, so why should we follow the rules concerning Russia, which does not possess the potential might that the Soviet Union had? Now we will carve out something for ourselves as we like and live by rules we invented for ourselves, ignoring our Russian interests. I will not go into details now, because we proposed a lot, in the field of strategic offensive arms, and in the field of missile defense. Everything was constantly rejected. Well, it became clear that until we assert ourselves as an independent sovereign power capable of defending our future, we will not be respected. In those relatively recent times when we tried to copy everything from the West,